Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Bryan McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, I'm going to interview my co host, Demetrius, and his recent adventure to the happiest place on earth and the gold standard for user experience, Disneyland. Welcome back, D. I'm very jealous. It sounded like you had a pretty amazing time at Disneyland, yes?
Oh yeah, it worked out really well. So I was there as a guest of my friend was on the Imagineering team that worked on Rise of the Resistance. So from time to time, he can get people in on his pass. So we went in. He took care of pretty much all of the logistics. And I just had to show up, stayed at his house, and we hit the park.
So, was this the first time you actually visited since the pandemic hit in 2019?
Yeah, so the last time I was there was in 2019. And I was there checking out the Smuggler's Run, the Millennium Falcon ride, which is an amazing experience also.
That's awesome. So, based on your just like general experience of kind of coming into the park, the feeling that you get when you show up, Disneyland is a very experiential place. I mean, you can even start smelling the food as you get close to the gates.
Mhm.
Did it feel the same, or did it have a feeling of something different since we've gone through this pandemic and popped out the other side with tools now that allow us to go back to places like this?
It largely felt the same. The only thing that I can kind of, as far as entry to the park, that was different was that you go through the metal detectors and security checkpoint before you get onto the trams that take you from the parking area to the park, where before the security area was basically entering into kind of the ticketing area where you would get into the park.
I see. And like, what day of the week did you go?
That was a Sunday, which actually affected the way in which we experienced the ride. So we'll get into that later.
Okay. So it was a Sunday. Was it packed? I mean, was there a lot of people there?
There was a lot of people there. It was more than I expected because even in before pre-pandemic, uh, the lines were shorter than they were the day that I was there, and
Hmm.
part of that was because Galaxy's Edge had opened up, so that was drawing a lot of attention, and it was just more capacity to the park. So today or that day was definitely a bit more packed than it had been pre-pandemic. The last time I had been there.
I see. And did you feel like people acted like they were still trying to, be safe and that kind of stuff at the park? Or did you largely not even notice? Meaning, like, where was anyone wearing masks, or do the workers wear masks or anything like that?
Some people were wearing masks. It wasn't too common. You're spending a lot of time outdoors, and it's big enough that you're not always right on top of people, which is helpful.
Yeah.
One of the cool things that I really liked was that in some of the rides, some of the indoor areas, some of the staff were wearing masks. But like on some of the Star Wars rides, they had like a vocoder effect, so it sounded like they were coming through like a stormtrooper helmet or something, as though
Oh,
the
that's
mask was
awesome.
part of their costume and as part of their story.
That's so cool. So then, I mean, Disneyland is mostly minus the rides outdoors, right? I mean, you think about the tram. The
Mhm.
tram is open air. The train is open air. You're walking around, downtown Disney, and you're also walking around Main Street and that kind of stuff. Almost all of that is open air. So is pretty much the only areas in which you kind of have to consider your environment, I should say, is when you're going into these stores. And do they do anything? Like, have they limited like the number of people that go in, or do they recommend wearing a mask in stores or anything like that?
No, it's pretty much left up to the guest. So the times in which you would be indoors are if you're eating, if you're shopping for some of the indoor rides. There are some theatrical experiences,
Uh huh.
and there are some museums. So people uh, usually know less about some, like they have art museums and history museums about the history of the park,
Yeah.
and some of the like concept art for some of the animation and things like that.
Uh huh.
We didn't do too much of that because I hadn't been to the park in a long time, so I was just mostly trying to get to see the changes that have been implemented on the rides.
Yeah.
Um, but those are areas in which you would would be indoors and potentially near other people, and there wasn't any mask enforcement or anything like that.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's like things have definitely like shifted because I know when they first opened up, when things were still, I mean, here's a strange part, things are still raging. I mean, you still see a
Mhm.
lot of COVID going around. But prior to that, when things were, uh, a little more active, but at the same time, people were seen to be a little more cautious, like right after the vaccines came out and that kind of stuff. They had some stricter policies where it's like, you had to wear a mask if you go inside of a store, and they limited the number of people that can shop around and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So it sounds like all that stuff pretty much has been lifted.
Yeah,
And it kind of feels like old Disneyland again.
yeah. For the most part, you could go in there and pretend that the pandemic doesn't exist, which a lot of people prefer to do.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about entry into the park. I'm very curious about this. So you guys drove in, and then you just took the tram in, right? And it dropped you off at the front
Yep.
gate. Okay.
So you come in, you park. They do a great job of getting people in pretty quickly. There is a slowdown as you're getting into parking, paying for parking, and getting through the toll booths. I think that there are systems that could speed that up. You could do something more like a fast track system or something where you just scan some kind of electronic device or your phone remotely and then just get right through.
Uh huh.
Um, that was probably the biggest slowdown. And then you go in, you park. There's nice big spots. They bring you in and direct you to where you should park. And as you're going in, just follow directions. We had a few people who decided they were going to try to go off path and find better parking, and it just doesn't work out for them.
Yeah.
Uh, and then you get on an escalator or a elevator. It brings you down to the street level. You go through a quick security check. It was very quick and short for us. And then you get onto a tram. And we were able to get onto, I think, the second tram going into the park. So,
Uh
and they
huh.
come quickly. So it only took a few minutes.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so how did you feel that they handled crowd management at this point? It's a Sunday, right? It's in the
Mhm.
morning. I would assume you guys went in the morning, like right when it opens?
We did not go right when it opens. We were up late the night before, so we got there around 10:30 or 11, and
Okay.
that's key. Also, there's a lot of strategies in order to minimize your wait time in lines, and I can ultimately talk about that also. But the only area where I thought, okay, here's an opportunity for significant improvement was getting through kind of the parking kiosks, paying for parking, and getting in. Beyond that, everything went really smoothly.
Now, I went in, let's see, when was I there? I was there September of 2019. Is that correct?
Mm,
Yeah, I was there September 2019. And at the time, we used the app that they have to basically handle everything. So I don't recall what the name of it was because I know they changed it again, like the name of the
yeah.
app. But in the situation in which we did it, we were able to pick all the rides we want to go on. You can like schedule the time to do that. We can order food and it's waiting at the window for you. I mean, it was the smoothest Disneyland experience I've ever had. And that was like the user experience that I imagine is kind of the gold standard for navigating such a large park in a short amount of time. I heard that changed. Is that true? Like, do you not have the
Yes.
same control as you did before like that via the app?
So the line management has changed, and I think a lot of people, and myself included, feel like it has changed ultimately for the worse.
Okay.
So the app is great in that you can look up or you can very quickly see the wait time for certain rides, and there were things can happen very strangely. Like there were times when Rise of the Resistance, the newest biggest ride in Disneyland,
Uh-huh.
had a shorter wait time than Indiana Jones. Or there were times
Interesting.
when things for whatever reason, like wait times would just drop for a period of time. So there were plenty of opportunities using the app in order to find short wait times in the lines, and I recommend people do that. Beyond that, the fast pass systems, or what used to be the fast pass system, has been replaced. The system that you used previously, where you schedule things, is no
Yep.
longer active.
Ooh. Okay.
They have a tool now, I believe it's called Genie Plus,
Okay.
and what it is you pay $20 a person per park per day,
Okay.
Actually, I think it might cover both parks, but $20 per person per day at a minimum, and that gives you access to their fast pass system, so you can use what's called lightning lanes.
Okay.
Uh,
So then you have a family of three and you're going to
mhm.
Disneyland. It costs you $60 per day in addition to the cost of your ticket in order to have the fast pass ability that I previously had.
uh, y- yes, partially. So
Okay.
the what you're paying for does not include some of the biggest rides. So there's an additional upsell charge if you want to get on Rise of the Resistance or the new Spider-Man Web Slingers ride. That can be up to $20, an additional $20 per person per ride. So
Hmm.
if you have a family of three, you paid $60 to get the Genie Plus to get access to what used to be Fast Pass. Now you want to get on Rise of the Resistance or the Spider-Man Web Slingers, you have to pay an extra $20 per person to ride that ride once.
Do you think there's any value in them doing this beyond just making extra money?
Mm, no, I don't think so. I mean, the previous Fast Pass system worked really well, and it provided people with opportunities without initial upsell. Because it's not as though the savings are being passed on to the customer, in which they're getting into the park for less.
Uh-huh.
It's just seems as though it is strictly a money making venture. Fewer people are taking advantage of the Lightning lanes or Genie Plus now, so fewer people are using it, so they're getting on a little bit faster. But it's also slowing down the normal lines relative to the previous system.
Okay.
So you are because they're favoring that side so much. That means they're letting people in from the normal standby line at a slower rate.
Hmm. Yeah, so this is interesting. So I'm curious on why they actually pivoted beyond just making money, because I kind of feel like when Disneyland tends to make decisions, they tend to make ones that are customer focused in the sense that,
Mhm.
oh, it would be faster for you to get your rides, faster for you to get your food, a more streamlined experience, that kind of stuff. But they also did have a big leadership change since you've been there, right? So Bob Iger is
Yeah,
no longer the CEO, right? So they have a new CEO and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I wonder if that plays a little bit into this.
So I don't have insight into the decision making process, but the chatter is that it's because of money. It's to increase their revenue.
Yeah. I mean, they did lose a lot of money during the time of the pandemic, right? No one was going to Disneyland, the parks were shut down, that kind of stuff. So, it could be a way of trying to like make that back. But ultimately,
I
what
mean,
we
this is
found,
what 120-year-old organization. It seems a little short sighted.
well,
Um,
I would say the same thing too, especially from a UX
mhm,
standpoint. And actually, when I think about it, the bigger issue is that when you go to buy your ticket, it's not just like, "Okay, here's your ticket, enjoy the park." It's like, "Here's your ticket, and then you want this, and then you want this, and then you want," it's
mhm,
like you're always adding these nickel and diming things. And I came back from, what was it called? Legoland with you in like 2018, and I told you, I said, the biggest difference between Disneyland and Legoland is Legoland obviously didn't feel as polished, in my opinion,
mhm.
than Disneyland, but it nickeled and dime you. It was
Yeah,
like everything you did, they're like, "That's an extra $20. That's an extra $5." It's like, it's exhausting. It's like emotionally exhausting.
yeah, and that's kind of one of the things we're seeing as far as the trend. And I'm hoping that it gets reversed because it did make for it did negatively impact the experience relative to my previous times in the park. The other thing is that they're changing up a lot of the food service. So you
Mm,
mentioned it with the app, ordering your food ahead of time so you don't have to wait. You can order food right before you get onto a ride, like Indiana Jones or something, and then get off and go pick it up. So that increases your access, reduces your wait time. It's really helpful, and also it ultimately kind of helps you as far as finding seating, because if you show up at a certain time um, they give you pickup windows, then it can help you. Those pickup windows will tend to align with when seating turns over. So
mhm,
that part of the app is great, but uh, my friend, the person I was there with, pointed out that they had changed a lot of the portion sizes and food options.
mhm.
So they cost the same, but you're getting significantly less food, and sometimes half of what it was before.
Yeah, I heard that's a common strategy, across the industry right now is even if you open up like a bag of chips, sometimes you'll see that it looks like there's fewer chips inside and stuff like that. Like,
Mhm.
they could basically make it feel the same, but you're actually getting less. I mean, I'll tell you, with the food thing on the app, like, it was amazing. So we were with eight people. I think it was kind of a large group that we had. Wait, yeah. And what we did is we placed the order for the food, and then we just walked around, did things, and then they're like, okay, it's ready at like noon or whatever. We walk over, we find a great place to sit, like you're talking about. One person went over, picked up all the food, delivered it. It was amazing. It was the
Mhm.
smoothest food experience I've ever had at Disneyland. And I remember thinking, like, they should not get rid of this, because if you're willing to pay for the app, the app was $20. I think it's like $20 to have access for the day or something, if I remember right. Um, and
Well,
it just made our life so much easier.
so I believe the app currently, in order to use it for things like checking ride wait times and checking for food and schedules for shows and stuff like that, I believe that's free. And what you're paying for is access to the fast pass system or the lightning lane or whatever they're calling it these days.
Yeah. Whatever happened to the magic bands? I thought that was a cool idea too. Leave all your stuff behind, put the band on, wristband on, and you can walk around and just like go on rides, buy things, get your food, and it just charges everything to your credit card.
I know there was a thing in Disney World. I don't know if it was ever implemented in Disneyland. I've never seen it. I didn't see
Yeah.
anybody with the Magic Band there, and I thought it would have been better. But you could also potentially just pay with your phone, even
Yeah.
through the Disneyland app, if you set up a payment system that use NFC in order to tap to pay and stuff. So
Y-
actually, a lot of the food payment just was done through the app. It just charged your card on file as you're ordering
Oh,
your
yeah.
food.
I mean, that's the
But
way
I
to do
also
it.
thought that the app itself probably could have, from an interface designs perspective, could have been a little bit better. It could have worked a little. I feel like DoorDash for picking up, or Seamless or Grubhub or any of these other ones for picking up was probably a little bit more user friendly.
Uh-huh.
Where the Disneyland app felt like it was kind of like the value proposition was really strong, but the execution I think could have been a little bit better within the app interface, because it felt like it was kind of tacked on to like a ride listing and map kind of app.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I actually remember thinking I wish it had a large tile system, because
Yeah.
you're in the sun, you're kind of busy, that kind of stuff. You want to see like big, huge tiles that you could just quickly with your thumb tap on stuff and kind of streamline it. So I definitely felt that way, because otherwise you'd see people looking really close underneath a tree, trying to like place their orders or do what they need to do on the phone itself. But also, I mean, upgrading the app also means that they can add new experiences like AR, VR, not VR, AR experiences if you have the right phone. I don't know if you ever tried out the app with um, Star Wars Land, but you can actually like turn some of the droids on with it and stuff.
Yeah, so that's a separate app. I didn't even play with it this time around. We actually spent, I think, the morning in Galaxy's Edge. That's
Okay.
the Star Wars land, which, if you haven't been to Galaxy's Edge, it is amazing. The attention to detail is absolutely off the charts. It's incredibly immersive. They built it in such a way so that you can't see any of the outside buildings or anything. It looks very much like you're on another planet. Um, then when it comes to that app, I've tried it before and it was okay. It could definitely use a round of improvements, because it felt very kind of entry level, I guess you would say, whether you could turn on certain sensors and stuff like that, and there was a backstory behind it, but it wasn't woven through completely.
I see. Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think it's coming together though. I hope they continue to kind of innovate on it and stuff like that, because I feel like there's a lot of AR opportunities there, right? Like
Hmm.
being able to pull the app up and point it at things, and suddenly you see things that other people can't see, or clues. Actually, the interesting part was, and this is a great kind of experience example, was the one where you have to translate what's on the boxes and stuff, and you're
Hmm.
basically running around trying to translate everything to figure out what's going on inside that land. And so the kids
Hmm.
that were with us were loving that. They were just like, "Oh, what does this one say? What does that one say?" And like trying to almost like tell a story. It's kind of like the Disneyland pins. You know how everybody runs around and tries to collect all these very specific pins from the different shop?
Yep.
Yeah, right. So it's almost like they were creating that experience basically in Star Wars Land, but through the app. And so I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I feel. Phil, Disney hasn't engaged too significantly on interactive entertainment like gaming. So there's opportunities here. I think that they could definitely improve in that area, but it is still a step above any of the other lands within the park. And there is a story that is built into it. And but the app at the time that I was using, and this was in 2019 because I haven't used it recently, but my friend told me it hasn't changed very much. Is
Yeah.
that it still feels very much like kind of like an add-on a little bit as opposed to kind of being deeply woven.
Uh-huh.
So I'm hoping eventually they get that kind of woven in. You can definitely rack up points on Smuggler's Run. It's not clear what you can do with those points. So things like that, like being able to use your points in a certain area, unlock certain elements of story, those would be, I think, great improvements to that app.
Did you have any wireless connectivity issues?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't using my phone a ton. We were just out experiencing the park,
Yeah.
but to the extent that I used the app and my friend was using the app, we didn't have any problems with connectivity.
Yeah, when we were there and it was like cray busy, there were times when I definitely had some issues where it was like taking a while to kind of connect or load, and I think it was just because there's so many people in the park doing it at the same time, and
Mhm.
uploading the pictures that you take, downloading the pictures you take, sorry, on your phone from the pictures that they're taking of you at those different locations. So I don't know if you did this, but like, let's say you go take a picture with a Disney representative, they scan a QR code that's on your app, and then immediately you have a certain number of days or something like that to download your pictures off of the storage drive.
Yeah, I believe that's still active. I've never actually bought the pictures from like the rides and things like
Uh
that, so I
huh.
haven't had any direct experience with that.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk a bit about rides for a minute. So, has anything changed? Do you see anything exciting? Any upgrades? Anything like that that we should be aware of?
So I almost exclusively, I went on a few rides that haven't changed, but I mostly rode rides that had changed. So that includes, there were two new rides that I'd never been on before. So that was Rise of the Resistance, which was amazing. I would, I would compare Rise of the Resistance most to Indiana Jones,
Okay.
where you're in kind of a vehicle and it's driving around and it's showing you different show elements and there's motion effects also. It is really sophisticated ride. The way that they've implemented certain illusions in areas in which you don't even realize that there's an illusion there sometimes. And it's only because my friend told me like here what you didn't even know was that this thing here, it's an illusion that creates this effect, and you didn't know it because it's not necessarily something that you would expect to be an effect.
Uh huh.
Uh, but this is what it does for you. And the way that they wove story in, the way that when the stormtroopers shoot at you and they hit the walls get damaged. The way that it progresses into like more of a motion ride, like it's as though you're kind of like riding through Indiana Jones and then you end up on Star Tours.
Hmm.
And there's a drop shaft like the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. There's all these different kinds of elements that come together in a way that's so seamless and so well done. Um,
That's awesome. One of the questions that always comes up is, are those full size AT-AT walkers?
They look like it. I mean, it's hard to tell because they're using forced perspective in order to put you in a point where you're looking straight up at them.
Yeah.
It definitely feels as though those are full size AT-AT walkers, but at the same time, I've never seen a full size AT-AT walker, so it's hard for me to make the comparison. But
Yeah.
in the moment, you're like, "Oh my god, they're AT-ATs," and they're shooting at me and shit.
That's amazing. And so I heard it was like a 15-minute ride or so. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, well, from the what they call the pre-show, you go in, you get a briefing, and there's these like holograms and stuff talking to you, like the help me Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. Really well done. And then you go into this is before you get on to the self-driving vehicles. From that until you get out is probably about 15 minutes. Yeah.
That's amazing. So it sounds to me like this ride created more of an experiential ride where you're actually interacting with both, animatronics, things like that, but also
Mhm.
humans, right? That are kind of like engaging you and kind of doing almost like role play.
Yeah. So within that, you are kind of a captive of the first order. what
Uh-huh.
they call the Empire in the new movies.
Uh-huh.
And so you are interacting with them. You're treated as that. You're herded as like a prisoner at one point, and you go through the whole process. What I'd say is it feels like the ride where almost every other ride they build the ride and there's a kind of a story around it.
Uh-huh.
This is almost as though there is a story and there's the ride fits the story more than the story fits the ride.
That's amazing. It almost sounds like this is kind of the future of Disneyland rides because this is the second one they've done with that, right? So almost everything that's inside of Star Wars Land seems to follow that theme of like this already exists, this story, and we're going to build something so you can navigate through that story.
Yeah, I mean, all the rides are ultimately have a story. Even or not Indiana Jones, obviously that one has a story. But even some of the older rides, like Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean, I was told that Pirates of the Caribbean is like a reverse dream sequence of a retired pirate. It's the pirate that you see at the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean as you're going through, and he's in the swamp in his rocking chair.
Uh-huh.
You're
Yep.
going back through that person's dreams and history. So it's true of every ride. It felt like more so with this ride.
Interesting. It's funny that you said Pirates of the Caribbean. So I was reading this BuzzFeed article yesterday, and it was
Uh,
talking about things that people wouldn't know unless you've worked at Disneyland. And one of the
mhm.
things, there was all kinds of little interesting things on there, um, but one of them was one of the reasons why. And I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just saying this is what someone stated in there. So I don't know. It didn't come directly from Disney or anything like that. Is that one of the reasons they tell you to keep your hands inside of the boat is not just because they don't want you getting your hand caught in any of the mechanics and stuff, which makes total sense, but because the water that's in there is unfiltered. So they don't want anyone to get any, if they have a cut or anything in their hands, they don't want to get any bacteria in their hands or cause any issues because the water is not filtered.
I don't think the water is dangerous, but it's, I believe, because of the water limitations in Southern California, it is reused. It's recirculated. So it's the same water going through the ride over and over again.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's what they meant by unfiltered. Like it just keeps, they just keep using the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah,
And so they don't
it's
want you
not
digging your
dangerous.
hands in there.
You get splashed with that water throughout the
Yeah,
ride, especially
that's
if you're in
true.
certain areas and it gets in the bottom of the boat. It's not dangerous water.
Yeah, there was also something else that they mentioned in there, which I thought was really interesting. They said that, every once in a while you have very rude guests. And I guess Disney workers, they have to be really, really respectful. Even if somebody's being rude to them, they have to basically just kind of say, "Okay, hope you have a great day," and like kind of push it along, all right, to kind of keep the peace and that kind of stuff. Unless it gets way out of hand, then I guess Disneyland police come. Um, but one of the things they were saying is that they have their own secret terms, like if you say, have a magical day or something like that. I don't know if that's the exact one, but that's code for like this person's a huge pain in the ass.
There are things like code V and stuff like that that indicates like somebody vomited
Oh
or
no.
or things like that. So there is that like that code for terminology for the ride support.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know about the secret jargon or anything other than that.
Yeah, it's pretty fun though. I mean, I think if you work there, you're going to always have secret jargon. You know what I mean? Because you're in on a clue, and you kind of are part of the magical experience, and the people that are visiting are not. So I thought it was funny. There's all kinds of little things in there that people kind of talked about. But so I want to talk about Indiana Jones for a second. So I heard that there was an upgrade done on the Indiana Jones ride. Was it open when you were there?
Yeah, we got on it. The line actually went really fast. The app said it was 50 minutes. We were probably in line for about a half an hour.
Okay.
Um, and if you go on a Sunday, after about 6 p.m., a lot of the crowds start to leave. So a lot of the locals are leaving, getting ready for work the next day. So the lines get shorter. So a lot of times that is a good time to get on some of the older, more popular rides. Some of the newer rides, the lines are going to stay long. Like if you get on Rise of the Resistance or Smuggler's Run or the new Spider-Man ride, those lines are going to be long all day. But after 6 o'clock on a weekday or a Sunday, the lines are going to get shorter for Indiana Jones, for Haunted Mansion, for probably maybe Space Mountain. I'm not
Uh huh.
sure. But it definitely got shorter for those rides. Jungle Cruise, we got on, I want to say, um, after after We went and got on Spider-Man Web Slingers, which is also a great ride. It's kind of essentially an AR experience where you're shooting webs at these things in the environment.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
like the brand new one, right?
yes, that is the newest one. That was the longest line that we stood in all day, and partially because the ride was breaking down a couple times.
Uh-huh.
And as my friend explained to me, a lot of the newer rides, if something breaks down, a lot of times you have to do a full reset, which means getting everybody off the ride, as opposed to like it for some of them where they can just do a stop, like Haunted Mansion. Everybody's heard we're stopping for a minute. Some ghouls and ghosts are messing with our system or something like that. Uh, for this one, if they have to stop the ride, they usually have to pull everybody off. So
Mm.
that extended it. The ride itself was great. It felt a little on the short side, especially compared to Rise of the Resistance, but the experience was great. The storytelling was great. It had Tom Holland integrated into the ride, so his like holograms of him were present throughout the ride, and it was a really cool, fun story. I really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that the lines get shorter going forward for that particular ride.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that they own that whole franchise now, so it's like I feel like that whole area can be expanded. But isn't that area kind of near? Correct me if I'm wrong, because my mind is like trying to think about the geography of it. But isn't that near the parking lot? Wouldn't they have to like push the parking lot out further if they wanted to expand that whole area?
Probably not. So what they did is they took over the Bugs Life land in California Adventure,
Oh, okay.
which runs up against the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. So the Guardians of the Galaxy ride is now kind of on the edge of Avengers Campus.
Mm.
So the only major rides there currently are the are Guardians of the Galaxy and the Spider-Man Web Slingers. But there's a fair amount of space there, and
Uh-huh.
there's outside of that are things like there's some winery that I don't know that anybody ever really goes to.
A winery?
Yeah, there's a little winery
Oh, I didn't know
that
that.
I feel like it needs to be there. I mean, it seems a little strange to come to Disneyland to drink wine. I mean, you want to avoid getting people drunk in the park because that's when people start acting out, getting belligerent. Um, but there's a lot of opportunity for expansion with there. I could totally see like a Doctor Strange ride where you're going through the mirror dimension and it's got all
That'd be
this crazy
cool.
effects going on. That I think would be an amazing ride. Obviously, there's like the Hulk ride in Florida and some of these other things. I think there's a lot of opportunities. Right now, the Avengers Campus to me felt a bit unfinished compared to Galaxy's Edge. It didn't have the attention to detail. There was a lot of space that was just not used very much.
Uh-huh.
There were a few large buildings, and I asked my friend, "What's that building?" It's like, "Oh, that's pretty much nothing right now." So I think there's definitely more coming for it. It's been open, I believe, for over a year now, so I'm a little surprised that more hasn't been done yet. But a lot of these things happen in their own time.
Yeah, and also the investments to go into that are humongous, right? It starts with Imagineering, and they have to design it, and then they have to build it, and they have to get approvals, and all that kind of stuff. So it takes years for them to complete some of
Yeah.
these
And if
experiences.
you look at like all the IP now, it's making it onto like Disney Plus and She Hulk and Ms. Marvel and all these different shows. There's a lot of things that could get built into Avengers Campus, and it could become a very dense experience, like Galaxy's Edge is. Like Galaxy's Edge, you can walk just about anywhere and see something interesting.
Yeah.
One of my favorite details about Galaxy's Edge is that if you look at the pavement while you're walking around,
Uh-huh.
you can see droid tracks. So
Oh, I
you could
never
see
even
something that
noticed that.
looks like you can see something that looks like R2D2 tracks. And if you follow them, you'll come to a point where they meet up with tracks that look like C3PO that came from a
Mm.
different direction. And then they go off in a third direction together. And it's basically that story plot point from A New Hope where they land on Tatooine, they go off in different directions, and they meet up again, and they go off in the same direction together.
That's super cool, and I had no idea. I love that there's things that you don't figure out the first time you go, and you don't figure it out
Oh,
the
yeah,
second time you go, and it just takes a while for it to, kind of unfold, and people will tell you things, and it's not all just given to you right away. Like, I think that's
yeah.
kind of what makes it so exciting and fun to do. So, but I'm curious though, like, when it comes to other rides, the more traditional rides, like, whether it be Indiana Jones, as it's one of my favorites, things like that. Did they upgrade any of those during the pandemic? Like
So
meaning like
I
clean them
didn't
up or
see
anything?
anything different for Indiana Jones. I believe they did do an upgrade years back, where they changed like the rooms where, oh, you looked into my eye and then it creates the effect, and now the
Yep.
walls can bleed and stuff like that. That was done a little while back. So if you haven't been on Indiana Jones for a number of years, it will be different when you go there. When I went on, I didn't see anything different. My friend didn't point out anything different about that. Um, some of the ones that we did go on that were different was they updated the Snow White ride,
Okay.
which historically you go to Disneyland and you just don't want to stand in lines. And one of the ones you could go on is Snow White. With the update, it now has a bit of a line. It's about 20 minutes when we were there, and this was like in the middle of the day, so this is probably peak ride
Yeah.
uh, length time that it's going to get. If you go later after 6 p.m. or so, it's probably going to get shorter. But they upgraded some of the animatronics. We saw some new kind of holographic type effects throughout it. It was a really nice update. I really liked it. The other one that we saw, this was kind of by accident. We were at the end of the night. We will. My strategy is usually, all right, we'll go and get on rides. We'll try to get on the newest, biggest rides very early in order to, because we know those are going to be the shortest lines, and they aren't going to get shorter.
Uh-huh.
Then we look for opportunities throughout the day in which some lines are shorter. And then as the day wears on and people start going home, we start looking at the more popular rides like Indiana Jones, where the lines are getting shorter. So we try to use that strategy in order to minimize the amount of time we end up waiting in line.
Yeah.
And then throughout, we might look through the shops and see what we're looking for and kind of create a like a list, or even just a mental list of things that we want to get. So I got something for my partner because she loves Thor, and I saw some Thor stuff, so I got some stuff for her. But as we were wrapping up, we went over to Tomorrowland. We picked up a couple things for her. My friend got himself something for his wife, and then as we were leaving, we saw that the Star Tours had a 10-minute wait line. So we hopped on Star Tours, and they had a new, Star Tours every time it has a different kind of set of destinations that you went to.
Yeah.
Uh, and just as luck would had it, we got on, and it was a new destination we had never seen before. And it's probably my favorite Star Tour that I've been on, where you go to the planet in Rise of Skywalker, which wasn't a great movie, but it actually makes for a great ride. Um, you go to the planet where the Death Star crashed into after it was blown up.
Hmm.
So you land on the planet, the waves are starting to take you, and then you get sucked in with the waves into the the corpse of the Death Star, and you run into like creatures there, Ionagas, and you go out and you go into a space battle. So that was really cool. That was a new update. I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. It looked great.
Do you think they would
Um,
ever move that into Star Wars land though? Because it's in the future land, right? Or what?
yeah, it's in Tomorrowland. So I
Tomorrowland, yeah.
know it's not going to get moved. And the reason is because Galaxy's Edge is specifically, from a story perspective, is set in the new trilogy with the New Order, or not New Order, that's a band. The First Order and the Rebellion. So
Hmm.
that is all like a Kylo Ren time period. What they've done is they've divided it. So that's kind of Kylo Ren more updated time period, and Tomorrowland is getting all the classic Star Wars stuff. So that's where you're going to run into Darth Vader and the Emperor and Obi-Wan Kenobi, like older Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker kind of stuff.
I
And
see.
the other one is a different time period.
But I mean, they theoretically could if they needed the space for Tomorrowland, right? Because people are getting so much of the Star Wars experience in general from the actual Galaxy's Edge, they probably could in time remove that ride completely, right? I know a lot of the legacy people like us like it, but like, if it disappeared, I think the younger generation wouldn't even really consider it, even if they wanted to put something new in there.
Well, I feel as though Tomorrowland is a bit underutilized, right? You have Star Tours, you have Space Mountain, which is currently Hyperspace Mountain, so it's Star Wars themed currently right now.
Uh-huh.
And then you have like the Tomorrowland Theater, which is just showing, I think, trailers for stuff, and you have the big Innovations building, which is currently Star Wars Launch Bay, and it's been that way for years now. And then you have things like Autopia and the Finding Nemo ride. Those are things like most, and I think there's a Buzz Lightyear experience too. But a lot of the Pixar stuff has been focused more on California Adventure, So it'd make more sense for those to be in California Adventure and for that area to be utilized a little bit differently. Like there, like something in Interventions, there could be some kind of ride experience, something in Tomorrowland Theater, some kind of even theater experience. I think we all remember seeing Captain EO there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think there's a lot in Tomorrowland that could be better utilized, but still with Space Mountain, it's my favorite ride of all time.
Yeah.
It's still a huge anchor and it brings people in. And the only thing I noticed different about if you haven't seen Hyperspace Mountain, the kind of Star Wars shell on it, that is great. But one of the things that they've done is they moved more of the ride queue. If you're just on standby and you're not using the lightning lane, they
Mm-hmm.
moved it indoors so that if it's a hot day, you're in air conditioning. So that actually
Smart.
was a small thing, but it was nice because the old line just had you standing out in the sun, and it made no sense at all.
Was it hot there the day that you were there?
I think it got to like 82 or so, so it worked out pretty well. It wasn't super hot.
Oh, okay. So not too bad. No, that's awesome. So the last section I'm curious about is that I want to talk about because I know we could talk about this stuff forever. Is events. Did you go to anything like, any big events at night, the color show or the light shows or any of those types of things that Disney has always done?
I did not. Well, yes and no. So I didn't intentionally. We caught a part of Fantasmic because we were walking around New Orleans Square and going on the rides while people were doing that. A lot of times, one of the strategies that we'll use is when people are lining up for Fantasmic or the parades or the fireworks. It's a great time to get on some of the rides because the lines are going to be shorter.
That's true.
So that's what we did when we were there. And I've seen Fantasmic and I've seen all of the events before. Usually for us, it'll be like, all right, we'll do one day focus on Rise, and the second day we'll do a little bit more of the shows and other experiences because we're
Hmm.
kind of winding down. This one for me was very focused on like I want to see the new stuff that I haven't seen over the past 2 years.
Totally.
But I did catch part of the Fantasmic. I did catch uh, the Spider-Man animatronic. I just
Oh
lucked out.
yeah.
I was walking by and we heard the show start. So we were walking by. So we just walked by more slowly because you're not supposed to stop unless you get into the crowd. And we didn't really want to get into the crowd where we were. So we just walked slowly and got to see kind of that show where you see the animatronic do the flip in the air, which is very realistic. It looked just like you were watching a real human being. If I didn't know it was an animatronic, I would assume that it was a human being who was just like some stunt person who was taking unnecessary risks.
Yeah.
You don't see it land, so I'm sure it lands on some kind of a soft surface or something.
Uh-huh.
And then somebody in a Spider-Man suit does the whole upside down descent. You know, they do the spider thing where his legs are on the webbing coming down,
Yep.
comes down from the roof of the building, and then comes out and takes pictures with the kids and stuff in the crowd.
That's
So
awesome.
managed to catch that. It was short, but it was well done. I really liked it. And then as we were leaving, this is another thing. We just got really lucky throughout the day in some ways. After we finished picking up, as we were leaving the park, after we finished picking up our the stuff we were bringing home for wives and partners and stuff, the electric light parade was starting, and it was the 50th
Ooh, I always
anniversary
like
of.
that one.
Yeah, it was really great. So it turns out that because we were leaving, we hit a where you're supposed to, if you're waiting for the parade, stand in certain areas so that you're not blocking people who are trying to leave the park. We were trying to leave the park, and we hit an area where we were blocked from crossing the street until the parade passed by. So we just happened to end up at a spot where you couldn't sit up and wait because it's reserved for people who are, walking to get out of the park. But we had to ended up stopping there until basically the entire parade went by, and then we were let out of the park, and we were actually able to get to our car. We were able to get on the first tram out and able to get right out to the street really quickly. So that was super smooth, and we caught the 50th anniversary of the Electric Light Parade just through happenstance. And of course, that is very traditional. It's lights on floats to the music, but it's so well done. It's an amazing experience. If you haven't done it, then I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of those things where you experience something traditional that absolutely holds up today.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing it for when I was little, and I saw it for the first time, and I was like, "What?" I mean, it was just
Oh yeah,
amazing what happens, and then the fact that they could put this on every day, and everybody kind of steps up and gets their outfits and dances, and it's pretty shocking, like that they can keep up this level of experience on a regular basis and consistency over years, right? And I'm sure they have like new staff
yeah.
all the time and that kind of stuff. Do you feel like Disneyland is still the gold standard for user experience? Do you feel like they still hold that title?
I do. I To be fair, I haven't experienced too much of the competition. Like I haven't been to Universal Studios in quite some time.
Yeah.
Um, I don't imagine Six Flags is caught up. I haven't heard a lot from them. And there's a new Nintendo World coming out,
That looks cool.
so that will be really interesting. But from what I understand, there's only a couple of rides, and it's strictly Mario based. I would love for it to have like a Legend of Zelda world and a Metroid world and some of the other franchises in there also. So I think other people are kind of aspiring to that. I also haven't been to Legoland, but as you said, it sounds as though they're nickel and diming, which might be less of a difference these days. But I also don't feel as connected to their IP. I mean, you have the Batman Lego movie and the Ninjago, so never even watched that one. Really liked the Lego movies, but like
Mhm.
it doesn't have as much behind it.
Also, too, and this is like a weird thing to say, but I've had multiple friends say this that have visited. They've gone to Legoland one time and never went back. Um,
Hmm.
is that it felt unpolished, like
Yeah,
just like you're coming around a corner on a ride and suddenly you could see like the back of buildings, right? Like you would never see
yeah,
that in Disneyland, right? They properly protect everything so that the experience you have when you're on a ride is that single experience rather than like, oh, look, I could see this other ride in the distance or I could see the maintenance room, right? Like I
yeah.
felt like you could see that.
The one thing about Disneyland is the attention to detail and the density of the detail is such that I when it's not pandemic, then I will typically go once or twice a year, and I've been doing that for probably around 20, almost 30 years now. I will still go there and see. Number one, they're always updating and keeping and introducing new things. Um, but I'll also see something for the first time, and I won't know if it's been there for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and I just never noticed it before.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
I think that plays a big role in kind of the overall like lifetime experience that they talk about of like
mhm,
wanting people who are our age to keep coming back ever since they were kids. And I think that's something
yeah,
they do really well. But I also think it's a delicate balance where if you tip over a little too far in one direction, like what you explained with, having to nickel and dime everybody for like, oh, you want to go on those rides and you want to have a fast pass, you're going to pay and it's per person and per day and per everything. That stuff's a slippery slope to the point where people stop making Disneyland or Disney World their adventures. And
yeah.
so,
Hopefully they correct that. But one thing that I think, the thing that I think makes Disneyland ultimately kind of a UX mecca is that people in Disneyland don't have the same kind of reservations or hangups, or they're willing to suspend disbelief. They're willing to do things they wouldn't do outside of the park. There were you see it in like the clothes that people wear, where they're willing to wear goofy hats they wouldn't wear in everyday life. They're willing
true.
to engage in a VR experience that they wouldn't do just walking down the street or going to some building in a that was just a normal brick and mortar store. So they're willing to engage in different experiences because they are setting up in a different mindset. They're in like this different kind of set aside environment that's not their everyday life, so they can do things differently.
Yeah,
The other
I
advantage I
agree.
think that Disney has when it comes to their parks is that the different Disney park locations, like California or Florida or Paris or Shanghai or Tokyo, they kind of have their own specialties a little bit in what they develop. Like one of the
Uh-huh.
things that I've learned that happens at the California facilities, including Imagineering, is they do a lot of the parades. So, and the parades there are the best you'll ever see, where they're actually like using the buildings, they're projecting things, making the buildings look like they're growing or shrinking, or like they're dancing and things.
Hmm.
And they'll develop them there, and they'll test them. They'll do their first run in California,
Hmm.
at Disneyland or California Adventure, and then they'll export them to other parks. And it's the same thing that's happening at other parks, where they're developing things and they're releasing them there first, and then they're exporting them to the other parks. Like Space Mountain was developed that way.
Yeah,
Space Mountain was developed in Florida, and the first Space Mountain was in Florida. And then when it was a success, they also built it in California. So that's their one of their advantages that you probably can't do at like a Legoland.
I see. Yeah, I think they have that opportunity, and like you said, they've built it over the course of, when did Disneyland start? Right? I mean, 100. Excuse, excuse me. 100 years ago, and they're continuing to build upon that. And every time a new leader comes in, new CEO or whatever it is, everyone kind of keeps a close eye on like, hey, are you going to maintain this experience and then also enhance it, bring it, to a new level with the new franchises that they own? I feel like the possibilities are endless. I mean, with Star Wars alone, right, that can go on for the next decade, right, of different
Yeah,
experiences. But like when you think about Marvel, it's like now that's a whole other group of people, um, that are coming there to buy their specific goods and to see the real Spider-Man and things like that. I think
yeah.
it's endless, and I think there's big opportunities. I also think too, it'd be kind of cool if you bought 4 tickets for a family, you immediately get access to Disney Plus for the next 6 months or something.
Well, yeah, or if you have a Disney Plus membership and you go to the park, then you get free access to their Genie Plus system or something like that.
Exactly.
Some kind of bundled experience, because when you're buying all these different things, it makes sense in order to kind of to give some kind of advantage to loyal customers. Same thing with like gaming. If they're doing some kind, I hear they're doing some kind of a metaverse experience they're planning.
Uh huh.
Like all of these things can work together. Maybe even within the metaverse, there's like a competition where you can win, free tickets, or you get a free like genie pass or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey D, this has been great. Thanks for the inside scoop of what's going on over there. I know that you've always loved Disney and you've always referenced Disney on these podcasts as being kind of a gold standard. Sounds like things are pretty much still kind of in that vein, which is awesome. They still got the UX as the front and center of the experience, other than a little bit of extra cost for fast passes and things like that. But let's do more of these. Maybe we need to do one from Hawaii, because I'm sure all of our listeners would love to know what it's like for us to visit one of the islands, right?
Oh yeah,
um, but
I'm happy to volunteer for that.
exactly, me too. We'll go together. We'll just do it live from Hawaii. But that was great. That was awesome, and thanks for doing that. I think it's fun to kind of shake things up every once in a while, not just focus on the things that are happening in tech, but also talk about experiences that exist out there that continue to delight people and make them happy. So thank you, everyone, so much again for taking the time to listen today. Really appreciate it. As we always say, we're going to post those links and many of the sources that we reference on Twitter, and you can find us and follow us on Twitter at the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast #1. If you like this podcast and found it interesting and informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Thanks again, and we will see you all next week.